Everyone, so welcome back. I am Douglas Johnson. If you're new here, I'm a spiritual teacher, meditation teacher, yoga teacher, teach non-duality, non-dual concepts and direct pointing. I also am a certified Kilobee inquiries facilitator. So I'm interested in the very deep end of spiritual work. Deep doesn't necessarily mean better, but deep is deep. So some people, all they're ready for is kind of shallow work, and that's beautiful and that's perfect. There's no judgment involved in that. So if you're new here, welcome. And that actually relates a little bit with what I want to talk today to you about, which is judgment versus observation. And I feel like this is a valuable topic of discussion. So I hope you'll hang in with me. Before I get into that, I do want to thank my patrons on Patreon. They are the ones that make these possible. Without their support, there's no way I would have the time or resources to do these very humble videos and talks for you. But despite them being very humble and low tech, they still require quite a bit of time, effort, and resources. So without my patron support, this would not be coming to you. If you'd like to become a part of that community and that group, you get access to classes that you don't get here on YouTube. You get access to other things that I post by other creators or contributors. You get access to events that I can't really post on YouTube. So you just basically get access to more of my teaching and what I would like to share with you. And you can do that for as little as $1 a month. So basically free, but if you get a lot from the content I produce, I really do appreciate your contribution. And as I said earlier, it really does help, however little amount it is. All right, so today we're here to talk about observation versus judgment. This has come up many times in the past, and it came up most recently in a meeting with my non-dual teacher, Scott Kilobee. And we were talking about shadow work and how oftentimes our judgments of others may actually reflect something about our own spiritual work that we need to do, our own psyche and blind spots. And today I didn't necessarily want to talk directly about the shadow, although it may relate with observation versus judgment. But yeah, what am I talking about here? And this distinction came up, which is why I bring it up. Some spiritual teachers will say there's two kinds of judgment, or not all judgment is shadow. I agree with that statement, but the way that I see it, a skillful use of language is to determine between judgment and what we can call observation. So if someone is talkative, I might say, wow, I meet somebody, let's just say her name is Susie, and I say, wow, Susie's really talkative. So is that a judgment or is it an observation? Well, honestly, it depends. Depends mostly on the weight of how I'm feeling. So for me, a judgment comes with some kind of idea and perhaps an emotion, a feeling that something is less than or something should be different than it is. So again, taking my friend Susie, who talks a lot, it could be if I took 100 people and lined them up and measured how much they talk, Susie would indeed come to the top of the barrel. What if I took 1,000 people? And again, we just observed how much they talk throughout the day. And then again, Susie was right at the top. She's the top 0% of talkers. She's right there at the very tip top. Is saying Susie talks a lot, is that inaccurate? Is that wrong? No, it's actually would be right on target. Compared to most people, Susie talks a lot, okay? So that's not a judgment. Some people might hear that and think, ooh, that's a bad thing, right? They might think no one likes someone who talks a lot. Well, that's not true, right? Some people love someone who's chatty. A lot of people do, actually. They like having conversations, and they don't like feeling like they're the one who's doing all the talking all the time. Again, this idea that people should or shouldn't talk a specific amount, this isn't a very awake concept or idea. Many people might have that idea that there's somehow some ideal amount that people should speak, and if you speak more words than that, now there's something wrong with you and we can judge you. And the opposite's also true, of course, right? So-and-so, they're too shy, or they don't talk enough, or they're really withdrawn, or they're too introverted. It goes both ways, always, right? We grow up thinking there's some kind of ideal human being who talks just the right amount. And if we're very ego-identified, we think we're it, right? We think, well, I talk just the right amount. But so-and-so talks too much, they talk more than me, and so-and-so talks too little, they talk less than me. So hopefully if you have some amount of awakeness, that's probably not the case. So is the statement, so-and-so talks a lot, again, is this a judgment? As I already alluded to, depends. So if I am just observing, and again, I'm observing accurately, which egos don't tend to do that. But interestingly, according to scientific research, generally the more one meditates, the more mindfulness one takes part in, the more accurate their observations are. Their observations are. So their observations are more, you might say, scientific. They're more in line with the reality. Someone who doesn't meditate a lot, someone who doesn't practice mindfulness, someone who hasn't cultivated that part of their brain, they are going to see things less accurately, okay? So what's a judgment then? A judgment comes, again, with sort of a moral condemnation or a judgment, right? Susie talks a lot, and people shouldn't talk a lot. Susie talks a lot, and boy, it would be so much better if Susie didn't, right? That's a judgment. And as some of you know, based on the teachings of Jesus that I have found very, very helpful in my own life, we want to let go of judgment. Now again, some people hear, oh, I can't judge, then I'm going to be stupid. I'm going to let people take advantage of me. I'm not going to be able to say anything about anything. Hopefully this talk is clearing that up, right? You can make observations about things without judging them. Susie talks a lot. Bill spends a lot of money. Bill spends more than he earns. Again, should Bill spend more than he earns? I don't know. Maybe he should. What do I know, right? Again, when we really wake up and let go of the beliefs and ideas that are so common and that were given to us without thinking about it, we can let go of judgment. We can let go of the idea that we know that someone isn't supposed to go bankrupt. For all we know, bankruptcy is their path to freedom. I know in my case, my personal bankruptcy, which I'm not particularly happy about or proud about, I would have avoided it if I could. However, I know in my life path, that was an absolute turning point for me. Again, this wasn't something that was really accepted in my family. It wasn't okay to declare bankruptcy. So therefore, it really caused some soul searching on my part. I had to really reflect and make some changes in my life, which I did. And I can say that that experience led me directly to the path that I'm on now and sharing this video with you today. So 100%, if that had not happened, as much as I would have liked to avoid it happening, that was necessary to get me to where I am today. I think without that challenge in my life, the difficulty, I don't think I would have stepped onto the path that I'm on now. Maybe something similar, who knows? But it is what it is. And as much as I would have liked to avoid it and tried to avoid it, it was unavoidable. And it resulted in me taking on the role that I have today as a teacher and minister and all of that stuff. So, judgment. Someone looks at my life at the point right when I'm declaring bankruptcy or maybe right before, and they come in with judgment. He shouldn't declare bankruptcy. He shouldn't have made these choices. His life would be better if he had not. I can say that I really doubt that that's the case. I am so fulfilled and happier than I've probably ever been at any point in my life, other than my initial waking experience. And the path since then has been like gradually making my way back. It's almost like my enlightenment experience showed me a glimpse of embodiment, a honeymoon, and then it's almost like it said, okay, now you have to work for it. Here's what life can be like, but now you're gonna have, if you want that, you're gonna have to work for it. And boy, did I have to work for it, all right? So again, this is just an example of the judgment that someone could have, the situation I was in, versus observation. Oh, Douglas is going bankrupt. That's just stating a fact, right? It doesn't have to be judgment involved. So, why is any of this of importance to us? Well, because as I've shared in the past, my experience is that judgment, it may seem like it's innocuous, like it's inevitable, like there's nothing we can do about it. If somebody is talking too much, of course there's something wrong with them. They should be quiet, they should shut up, they should stop, they should realize, they should have some self-awareness. Whatever it is we think or believe, it's not in line with ultimate truth. Some people, they talk a lot. Some people talk very little. This idea that the ego creates, that there's some kind of perfect amount that someone should or shouldn't talk, is an illusion. Granted, we may all have a preference for how much someone talks, but there have been people who have achieved great things and been great individuals, great souls, who maybe if we had met them personally, we would have been like, wow, they talk a lot. Okay? So this idea, again, and we've touched on this before, that there's some kind of perfect human and none of us are reaching up to that perfect human, this is an illusion. There is no perfect human who talks just the right amount, who is always kind when we want them to be kind, who never gets upset, who whatever it is we imagine this person to be, they don't exist. So when we start piling up the judgments, as inevitable as they may feel to us, like, of course, they talk too much, and of course that's a problem, it's actually weighing on us. And the reason it's weighing on us is because it's actually strengthening our ego. What is the ego? Well, I think many of you know, you've heard me say in the past, basically our ego is an illusory sense of separate self, an illusory sense of separation, creating a sense that I am actually separate from someone else when it's not actually really factually, or it's not true in any sense of the word, really. We are not separate, independent beings. And so the idea that I can like judge someone else without hurting myself is a fallacy. Now, most people, especially egos, believe that that's absolutely not true, that they can judge and judge and judge and judge, and that's just going to, make them feel better about themselves. Well, as I already mentioned, it does strengthen the ego. So if I'm strongly identified with my ego, I might get a sense somehow in some strange way that, yes, I am gratifying myself or helping myself, or I'm lifting myself up, right? Because at least I may be a lot of things, I may have a lot of problems, but at least I don't talk too much, right? Like Susie does. At least I don't do that. So yeah, Susie, she really should talk less. At least I don't do that. I may not have the best manners, but at least I don't talk too much like Susie. Whew, boy, that girl can talk, right? Very often, judgment comes with this connotation. So you really want to be mindful. And as you all know, a lot of the things I speak about are becoming mindful of our judgments and mental states as we go about our day. We can do formal meditation, we can do inquiry to begin tuning in and becoming aware of these things. But at a certain point, we really need to start paying attention moment by moment. And I want to be clear, I'm not suggesting that you freak out or try and constantly push away judgmental thoughts. But if you start observing them and start questioning them, okay, it's not about pushing them away. It is about really looking into the validity of the thoughts. And if you're awake, we can take the example of, again, I don't really have a friend named Susie who talks too much, but we'll just use this example right now, my imaginary friend. So we take a look at my friend Susie. I meet her, I have the judgment. I'll say judgment this time, right? She talks too much. And again, this is one way you know the difference between judgment and observation. One is an observation. Wow, Susie talks a lot. Is that true? Well, again, if we lined up 1,000 people and measured how much they talk, Susie would be right there at the top. Okay, let's just say that we could do that. So the observation is actually accurate. I am conveying a quality about somebody, about reality, that's actually accurate. She talks a lot. Now notice the difference between Susie talks a lot and Susie talks too much. Okay, it might seem obvious, but if you start observing in your own mind, again, the a lot versus too much, right? So Susie talks too much, judgment. Susie, right in the phrase there is the idea that too much. So let's question that thought. Does Susie really talk too much? Well, again, we could line up 1,000 people and Susie's talking more than all of them. But what if Susie is a genius? What if Susie is a prophet? What if Susie has a lot that she's trying to convey or say? What if everything Susie says is actually really, really important? Is she now talking too much? Or maybe she's talking just the right amount. Or maybe she's actually not talking enough. Maybe, again, she's one in a million in terms of her insight. Or perhaps she's a poet and what comes out of her mouth just gives people chills and, you know, helps them become enlightened or helps them have great, deep realizations or insights about their life. Well then, for goodness sake, Susie should talk more, shouldn't she? So I hope that this makes a distinction clear for you. So observations, very, very helpful, right? The sun is shining. That's an observation. It's not a judgment. Is it good or bad that the sun is shining? I don't know. And that is a good place to come from if you are awake. I don't really know how things should be. I might know how I'd like them to be. I still have a personal preference. I certainly don't know how they should be. Should Susie talk less than she does? I don't know. Does Susie talk a lot? Yes. If I compare her to a lot of people, she talks more than all of them. So the statement, Susie talks a lot, again, I can verify and it lines up or matches up with reality, okay? Again, observation versus judgment. So, judgment, heavy. It's going to weigh me down. It'll strengthen the ego. Why should I care? Because the ego is a source of suffering. It may bring us temporary joy, temporary comfort, temporary safety, but nothing that lasts, nothing that won't be shaken by a small change in the forms around us, what's going on around us. It's just, you know, that's the nature of the beast. So do we want to listen to the ego? Do we want to follow the ego? Do we want to strengthen the ego? No. That's just what my teaching shares with you. If you personally think it's a good idea, by all means, go ahead. I'm not here to tell anybody what to do or what to think, but this is again shared from my own experience and from studying the great wisdom traditions. So judgment is going to strengthen the ego. The ego will increase our suffering. So what can we do about this condition? Is there anything we can do? Well, the first and most important thing always is going to be recognition, is realizing that that's the case, that I am judging someone. How can I know if I am or not? Well, generally you know by the weight, the emotional weight of what you're experiencing. So again, let's go back to my imaginary friend Susie, who talks a lot. If I say in observation, wow, Susie talks a lot. Okay, there's no moral weight, emotional weight to that statement. In other words, my body is clear. As has become a term that's more and more used these days, Bissell Vindekirk wrote a book called The Body Keeps the Score. And so the body does keep the score. The body also, I might say, doesn't lie. So we can tell ourselves whatever, but how do we feel in our body? How does our body feel? Does our body feel open, good, vibrant, peaceful? Or is our body full of pain, contraction, unpleasant emotions that we feel like we're holding down or trying to manage constantly? This is an indication that we may be lying to ourselves. the body is really telling us the truth. So, Susie talks a lot. No reaction in the body. If someone questions me or argues with me on that, I might bring up a point or two about, well, here's why I think that, but I'm certainly not invested, and I'm willing to change my mind at any time. If someone says, oh, but so-and-so talks way more, and this other person talks way more, and, by comparison, Susie hardly talks at all, I'm open to this, and, oh, yeah, you know what, you're right. Compared to those people, Susie hardly talks at all. Right? There is no attachment there. There's no investment in being right. Again, when we aren't identified with the ego, we really aren't invested in being right. We could care less. We'll still make observations, but they're not judgments. Now, judgment very often, in the way that I'm using the term anyway, will come with an emotional weight and emotional investment in being right. So again, judgment. Susie talks way too much. And then someone else points out, well, I don't know, these other people talk more. And then my mind will come back with my ego, because my mind is in service to my ego in this case. It's identified with it. So it's trying to be right. It will come back, well, no, think about this time, Susie just wouldn't stop talking, this or that, whatever, coming up with all kinds of examples, trying to be right. Also, as I mentioned, as you're saying that, Susie talks too much, there is this sense of kind of righteous indignation, this sense of Susie talks too much and she shouldn't talk too much. Again, all strengthening the ego. So these are all things that, for our own sake, for our own peace of mind, for our own sense of joy, we really want to let go of these things. Okay, so let's see if we can put this all together. I observe something, I see something happen, a person says something, does something, I notice something about the world or current events or whatever, and a thought pops up in my head. The first thing I can do is try and notice, does a physical contraction or suffering accompany that thought or that idea? Do I start to feel uneasy, unpleasant, emotional because of that idea? If the answer is yes, I'm emotional, I'm invested, I want things to be different than they are in an emotional way, because that would make me feel better, okay, then we probably need to look again and investigate, is this a judgment or an observation? Chances are, if the statement has something along the lines of a should or shouldn't statement, then again, it's a judgment. If it has something like too much or too little, again, it's probably a judgment. And again, it's not that we will necessarily be able to stop the mind from producing judgments, at least not immediately, if we've been entertaining judgments, using them, getting excited by them our whole life, then the mind is just used to generating them, getting rewarded for doing that, and it will continue to do so for probably quite some time, maybe for the rest of your life. It really doesn't matter that much. It's important. It's the interesting thing about this work is the mind can go on producing what we might call unenlightened thoughts or judgments, but we don't have to believe them. We don't have to buy into them. We don't have to invest in them, you might say. We can, again, question them. So, step one, is there suffering or an emotional charge? Again, I'll try and give you a slightly more concrete example, different one than the friend Susie. My boss should appreciate me, okay? Or my boss doesn't appreciate me. However you want to look at it, however you want to phrase it, it's fine by me. So, right away, let's check, is there a contraction? Let's say yes, there is. You know, I've worked at that company longer than my boss has. I'm the hardest working person there. I deserve that raise. I deserve the recognition. I'm not getting it. My boss should appreciate me more. Okay, contraction. Second, should. Right there in the phrase, right? They should. The Buddha a long time ago observed that things just are as they are. In the Zen tradition, it's called isness or suchness, and this is just the way of it. Our human limited scope of understanding, our beliefs about the universe, about reality, about ourselves, these generate the shoulds and shouldn'ts. They don't come from a universal. So this idea that people should be one way or not another, even the idea that egos, like people should get rid of their egos. I've met spiritual teachers like this who talk like that or act like that. I will agree with any teacher who says that if you don't want to suffer, then you definitely want to be free of your ego. But maybe you want to suffer. I don't know. I doubt many people would say consciously that they want to suffer, but having worked with people on unconscious levels for quite a while now, it's come to my attention that many people unconsciously do want to suffer. They don't know it, and consciously they would love to stop suffering. But there is an unconscious program running that basically will not allow them to let go of their suffering. And so the unconscious will always win. That's another thing. You can quote me if you like. Generally speaking, if there are two programs running, one is conscious, one is unconscious, and they are in opposition to one another, the unconscious will always win that battle. So we have the thought, right? We feel the suffering contraction in our body. We investigate. Is there a should? How is the statement phrased? Is there a should, kind of a moral weight to it? Yes. Okay, then the question arises, what should I do next, right? After all those steps. Well, this is where we can start to inquire a bit. And again, inquiry, in its most basic, I, again, sort of lead people through a very specific type of inquiry, but inquiry is just questioning, being curious, putting aside things that we might have grown up thinking are true or assume are true, but looking beyond those surface, everyday truths that everyone just accepts as true and actually investigating whether they are true or not. So, my boss should appreciate me. Who says? Where did you hear that? Where did you get that belief or idea? We might believe that, well, the world would be a better place if people appreciated one another, if they took care of one another, if there were world peace. But we actually don't know that. We actually don't have any evidence for that. So this idea, this belief, my boss should appreciate me, we're just basically pulling that out of thin air. It's not written anywhere. We didn't hear it from on high. No one told us that other than maybe our mother or our friends or our own mind, but there really is no grounding in truth. So my boss should appreciate me. Does it hold up to scrutiny? Absolutely not. Is it some kind of universal law or truth? Is it something that we actually see happening in reality? What the teacher, the spiritual teacher, Byron Katie, says is she's a lover of reality. And so she doesn't argue with reality. So what is reality telling us? What is it showing us? Bosses don't always appreciate their employees, right? Children don't always appreciate their parents. Parents aren't always proud of their children. Again, we may have a very strong belief or idea. We may even read in some scripture or something, this is how people should behave. But for Byron Katie and for myself, and for the teachers that I respect and listen to, the ultimate truth is right in front of our faces. So we don't have to look very far. And Byron Katie would say that I suffer when I argue with reality only 100% of the time. So it's pretty much guaranteed. Reality doesn't need our permission. It doesn't need our approval. It just is. And the reality is bosses don't necessarily appreciate us. So judgment, right? They should. We could say, we could turn that into an observation like my boss doesn't appreciate me. Now again, just because I say my boss doesn't appreciate me, that doesn't automatically make it a factual statement. But we've taken some of the moral and ethical weight off the statement, and we've at least turned it into an observation. Whether that observation is accurate or not is a different story. But a lot of times, at least, observations can feel a bit better, and we could verify it, right? We could potentially take a poll in our workplace. Maybe our boss would even agree. We might go to our boss and say, I think you don't appreciate me. And they might say, you're right, I don't. I don't think you're doing a good job, right? We might think we're doing awesome, but they might not see it that way. That's the amazing thing about perspectives, is they can be so different and so interesting in that way, the way we perceive and think. Again, an ego will be stuck with one perspective, its own. But enlightened awareness doesn't have to stick to just one perspective. It can sort of dance and move and be selective. It can kind of choose perspective as it wants based on what makes it happy, what brings it joy. So we can let go of the judgment, turn it into an observation. My boss doesn't appreciate me. Not my boss should appreciate me, but my boss doesn't appreciate me. Again, we could look for verification if that's necessary. And then what do we do about it? Well, we might decide my boss doesn't appreciate me, but man, it's a great job. I'm learning so much. And I love my coworkers. The benefits are great. The pay is great. So my boss doesn't appreciate me, but I'm going to keep working there anyway. And I'm going to let go of the idea that my boss should appreciate me, right? Because we already explored that idea. Bosses just sometimes don't appreciate people, even if they're people that deserve appreciation. Just the way of the world. It's just the way of the world. It's probably not going to change anytime soon, if ever. So we just accept that fact, because for all we know, we could leave this job, go to another job, and our new boss won't appreciate us. This actually can point us back to deficiency story and repressions and unconscious programming. So if I have a deficiency story or unconscious programming that basically tells me I need to be unworthy in order to be loved and accepted, then I will find myself in situations I will actually seek out. As strange as it sounds, as crazy as it sounds, this actually happens. People will actually seek out situations where they are unappreciated or underappreciated. And if they are appreciated, they will simply filter that, so they won't be able to see that or experience that appreciation. I've seen this with people where they are literally in a loving relationship, and yet for them, they feel unloved. And it doesn't really matter what their partner does, they will not be able to receive that love. It's not that love isn't being given, it's just that it will not be received. That, again, has to do with the deficiency story of the individual, not actually the world out there, which is why this can relate with shadow work as well. So I turn the my boss should appreciate me or into my boss doesn't appreciate me, right? I let go of the should and to the just simply doesn't. And then again, I can decide, well, it's a great job, so I'm going to keep working that job. Or I can say, you know what, I really would like a job where my boss appreciates me. That's really important to me. Nothing wrong with that at all. But we can leave our job with love, appreciation, and gratitude for the opportunities it's given us. It's paid our bills, right? We probably learned some things, maybe made some friends. And maybe our boss, other than not appreciating us, is actually a fairly decent, good person even, right? So we don't have to, again, leave with the heaviness in our heart of, I'm leaving this darn job because my boss doesn't appreciate me, right? Again, ego should, my boss should be appreciating me, but they don't. We let all of that go and we move on with love, gratitude, and appreciation in our heart. Thank you for everything this job has given me, but I want a job where my boss is going to appreciate me. Maybe that's the most important thing to you. Maybe you're willing to take less money. Maybe you're willing to work longer hours. Maybe you do anything just to be in a job where you feel like you are appreciated. Nothing wrong with that. But that probably needs to be very clear. For many of us, we'll find that in some jobs, perhaps we're appreciated. In other jobs, perhaps we're not. Perhaps some people appreciate us. Perhaps some people don't, even at the same job. And perhaps we are appreciated some of the time, and at other times we are taken for granted. This tends to be my experience. It's not all or nothing, even with the same person. People change, right? Their moods change, their perspectives change. So at one point they might feel very grateful and appreciate what we are and what we bring to the table. And at other times they might find themselves just taking us for granted, or even wishing we were different and that we could deliver more, do more. So, in summary, observation is very similar to judgment, but without the emotional poison. That's what's important. We might think when we're judging others that it's somehow affecting others. And indeed, it may be, but maybe not in the way that we are hoping or would like. We also might think it's not affecting us or that it's affecting us positively. That by me thinking that you are lesser than, that you have a quality, because almost always we judge people on things that we think that we ourselves don't possess, right? They talk too much. We very often don't then follow that up with, and I talk too much. Some people might say, well, I do that, so I notice it in others. Okay, but usually, very often, it's not the case. We see the other person having this undesirable trait or quality that we don't have. And again, this relates back with shadow. So regardless of what I think, regardless of what my ego is telling me, I'm not doing myself any favors. I am drinking emotional poison. And A Course in Miracles goes so far as to say that what you think about others, you ultimately think about yourself. That you can't judge others without judging yourself. And I believe this is accurate. In my experience, it is, that ultimately all is one. Yes, we are different, but we are not separate. So ultimately, learning to love everything and everyone. I don't have to like everything, but I do need to love everything. And so letting go of judgment and simply, again, allowing observation. I don't think we can survive without it. This tree is taller than that tree. Which one's better? It depends. Are we looking for a tall tree or a short tree? If I'm looking at Christmas trees, this one's taller than that one. Well, do I have a large ceiling or a short ceiling? Okay, which one is better is going to depend on what I'm looking for. Okay, so again, this human idea that there's some universal better or worse, it's better to be taller, it's better to talk less, it's better anything. There's no absolute better or worse. It all is contextual, all depends, it all is variable given circumstance. So again, an asleep person doesn't understand this, and an awake person does. An asleep person suffers because of their belief, and an awake person doesn't suffer. All right, so that's it for me today, everyone. If you're still here, thank you for listening. If you haven't already, please subscribe, leave me a comment, like this video if you got something from it. And please do check out the Patreon page. Everything is open to the public over there. But again, there's an opportunity if you want to help support the work that I do for as little as $1 a month. And every contribution is appreciated. Thank you so much. And please reach out if you sense there's anything I can help you with. I've studied with many teachers, and I've been doing this work for most of my life at this point. So please reach out. There may be ways that I can help you on your path if you feel stuck or frustrated, or you get a sense that maybe you missed something along the way, or you just want to deepen what you have. I may be able to help you with all of those things, okay? All right, everyone, thanks so much. And until next time, namaste and have a great day.